Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know the Prime Minister will have whipped his backbenchers to scream and shout, and that's fine. That's fine. But I hope he's also sent a clear message that there's no place for sexism and misogyny or looking down on people because of where they come from in his party, in this House, or in modern Britain. Next year, Mr. Speaker, the UK is set for the slowest growth and the highest inflation in the G7. Why is he failing to manage the economy?
Mr. Speaker, well, let me first of all say, in response to what the right honourable gentleman has said about sexism and misogyny, that I exchanged messages with the right honourable lady over the weekend, and I repeat what I said to her. There could be absolutely no place for such behaviour or such expression in this House, and we should treat each other, Mr. Speaker, frankly, with the respect that each other deserves. So, and on his point about the economy. Yes, of course it is true that there is a crisis of global inflation around the world, but this government is tackling it with all sorts of ways that you would expect, Mr. Speaker, helping people with the cost of their energy, British energy, far more, by the way, than the Labour will put in, a British energy security strategy to undo the mistakes of previous Labour governments, Mr. Speaker, but above all, making sure that we have the fastest growth in the G7 last year, which would not have been possible if we listened to him. And if we listened to him, we would have frankly never come out of lockdown, Mr. Speaker, in July last year. And never forget, Mr. Speaker, that no Labour government has left office with unemployment lower than when they came in.
Mr. Speaker, he sounds like the comical alley of the cost of living crisis. He pretends the economy is booming, but where there are problems, they're global. But in the real world, our growth is set to be slower than every G20 country except one, Russia. And our inflation is going to be double the rest of the G7. Does he think that denying the facts, staring him in the face, makes things better or worse for working people?
Mr. Speaker, the facts are, as the IMF has said, that the UK came out of COVID faster than anybody else. That's why we had the fastest growth in the G7 last year. That would not have happened, Mr. Speaker, if we'd listened to Captain Hindsight. And if he studies their forecast, we will return to being the fastest by 2024 and the fastest in 2025, Mr. Speaker. That's what the IMF's forecasts say. He asks about. Read it. He asks about working people, Mr. Speaker. This is the government. This is the party that supports working people. Unlike them, with the biggest increase. Yes, I'll tell you what's going up. The living wage is going up, Mr. Speaker, by record amounts. Employment is going up, Mr. Speaker, by record amounts. 500,000 more people. They don't want to hear that. Let me give them the figures. 500,000 more people in paid employment now than there were before the pandemic began, and youth unemployment at or near record lows. Under Labour, just to remind you, everybody, under Labour, youth unemployment rose by 45%.
Mr. Speaker, this must be the Oxford Union debating skills we've been hearing so much about. Failing to answer the question, rambling incoherently, throwing in garbled metaphors. Powerful stuff, Prime Minister. Here's the problem. It's not just his words that are complacent, it's his actions as well. The cost of living crisis was blindingly obvious months ago. But he said worries about inflation were unfounded. And he backed a tax-hiking budget. Does he think that his choice to be the only leader in the G7 to raise taxes during a cost of living crisis has made things better or worse for working people?
Mr. Speaker, as I've just explained to the House, and I'll repeat it once more, this government and our Chancellor cut taxes on working people. The national insurance contribution went down, Mr. Speaker, by an average of £330. But if he's talking about the health and care levy, maybe that's what he's droning on about. Look at the health and care levy, Mr. Speaker. That is what is enabling us to pay for 50,000 more nurses, to pay for clearing the COVID backlogs. How tragic, how pitiful that the party of Bevan should now be opposed to that investment in the NHS, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, he's an ostrich, perfectly happy keeping his head in the sand. Working people are worried about paying their bills. They're spending less and cutting back. That's bad for business and bad for growth. Yeah. Working people are looking for help. But this week, millions will look at their payslip and see a tax rise with his fingerprints all over it. Does he think that his 15th tax rise has made things better or worse for working people?
Mr. Speaker, what we're doing for working people is not only lifting the living wage by the record amount, helping people on universal credit with a £1,000 tax cut, Mr. Speaker, but also cutting national insurance contributions, lifting the threshold so that on average people pay £330 less, Mr. Speaker. But what we're also doing is taking our country and our economy forward, investing in our NHS, which is a priority for the people of this country, unlike for the Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, but also ensuring that we have record creation of jobs, Mr. Speaker, and that is what matters. High wage, high skill jobs. 500,000 more. They don't care about jobs, Mr. Speaker. We do. We believe in high wage, high skill jobs, and that's the answer for the economy.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, it's as if he's only just waking up to the cost of living crisis. And his big idea, fewer MOTs. It actually makes the Cones hotline sound visionary and inspirational. North Sea oil producers are making so much unexpected profit, they call themselves a cash machine. Yes. That cash could be used to keep energy bills down. Instead, he chooses to protect their profits. Let household bills rocket and slap taxes on working people who are earning a living. Does he think that that choice has made things better or worse for working people?
What we're doing is making things better for working people than his plans would do by a mile, Mr. Speaker. We're raising more, we're putting more to support people with their energy costs than he would with his new tax on business. £9.1 billion that we're putting in, an immediate £150 cut in people's council tax. Their thing only raises £6.6 billion. And what it does is it clobbers the very businesses that we need to invest in energy to bring the prices down for people across this country. Clean, green energy, the wind farms, the hydrogen that this country needs. And what this government is also doing, Mr. Speaker, is reversing the tragic, historic mistake of the Labour Party in refusing to invest in nuclear. We're going to have a nuclear reactor every year and not a nuclear reactor every decade, which is what we got under Labour.
So they're the party of excess oil and gas profits, and we're the party of working people. This Tory government's had its head in the sand throughout the cost of living crisis. First, they let prices get out of control. Then they denied it was happening. They failed to do anything about it, and then they made it worse with higher taxes. Because of his choices, we are set to have the slowest growth and the highest inflation in the G7. Mr. Speaker, a vote for Labour next week is a vote for a very different set of choices. We would ask oil and gas companies to pay their fair share and reduce energy costs. We wouldn't hammer working people with the worst possible tax at the worst possible time. We'd insulate homes to get bills down. and we'd closed the tax avoidance schemes that have helped his Chancellor, where is he, reduce his family's tax bill while putting everyone else's up. That's a proper plan for the economy. So why doesn't he get on with it and finally make choices that make things better, not worse, for working people?
Mr. Speaker, I can tell the right honourable gentleman, I've listened to him over many weeks, over many years, this guy is doomed to be a permanent spectator, Mr. Speaker, because we have a plan to fix the NHS and fix social care. They have no plan. We have a plan to fix our borders with our deal with Rwanda. They have no plan. We have a plan to take our economy forward. They have no plan. Let me tell you something, Mr. Speaker. He talks about the elections. He talks about the elections in a few days' time, Mr. Speaker. Let me remind him that everywhere you look at Labour administration, it is a bankrupt shambles, Mr. Speaker. Hammersmith Council spent Labour-run Hammersmith spent £27,000 on EU flags, Mr. Speaker, 2 years after the referendum. Labour-run Nottingham Council bankrupt because of their investment in some communist energy plan of the kind that he now favours. He should apologise for it. Labour-run Croydon bankrupt, Mr. Speaker, because of their dodgy property deals. And never forget, Labour-run Britain in 2010, bankrupt because of what the Labour government did. And they said they had no money left. Mr. Speaker, he looks at council tax. Look at the difference between, he boasts he lives in Islington or Camden or somewhere like that. He should contrast neighbouring Westminster, which has the lowest council tax in the country, and better services too. That's the difference between Labour and Conservative across the country, Mr. Speaker. Vote Conservative on the 5th of May.